Hi, everyone. It's Bob Ost. Yup, I'm here again. It's the 104th consecutive true community gathering on Friday. And today is Friday. Um, God, I can never remember the date. Is today May 6th? It's May 6th, isn't it? Okay, so it's May 6th, everyone. Those of you out in YouTube land, thanks for finding us, finding your way to our true channel. Good to have you here. Um, we've been doing this as kind of a community thing. April 17th, 2020, reached a point where I didn't know what to do being in shutdown. Remember shutdown? um, and everybody was kind of tearing their hair out and on edge and not knowing what to do and not knowing how to deal with being isolated. So I asked if people wanted to meet and get together on Fridays and just hang out together and talk about stuff. And me being me, I also added in another feature. I decided to have speakers every week. So 104 consecutive weeks, I've had terrific speakers every week talking about various aspects of what we've been living through and various aspects of how it is applied to theater. Uh, Now we're not talking about working in isolation as much, although, as we found out in our opening introductions of the room, there's a lot of people getting COVID right now. So it isn't over. It also isn't as deadly. So we've talked about a lot of different things over the last 2 years. Now we are finally going into live performance, and theater has reopened, and um, we've had some success in coming back to live performance. Um, and the thing that's been unique about this season, well, there's many things that have been unique about this season. Just the fact that we're coming out of 2 years of isolation and we have to find ways of gaining the trust of our audiences so that audiences will come and sit in the theater and support the work that we're doing and that we're offering them. That's a unique situation for us. But the other thing that's happened, I think the first step was Passover. There was a whole string of shows that have opened this season that um, have focused on diverse voices that are not the usual ones that we hear in theater. When we talk about diversity in theater and we talk about this season, I need to clarify, I need to just state it that it's been mostly black voices. It's been both, we say BIPOC, but we haven't had that much of a surge in Asian voices. Asians are still one of the least heard members of our culture. And we haven't had particularly any increase in Latino, although we did have Ariana DeBose win an Academy Award, which is something that's worth mentioning. Um, but we've had a succession of plays by black writers and with producers that have mostly been led by black producers and producers of color. Um, and it's been a very tough time for this to happen. This is a dream come true for many of us, but it's a dream that came true in a very difficult time. And one of the people that's been on the front lines of this whole situation is Marcia Pendelton, my guest today. She's a marketing expert who knows the community very well, knows the non-white community very well, and probably knows the white community as well. But right now, our goal is to try to increase diversity, diverse voices in our culture, and we're going to talk about how we're doing with that because it's been a mixed blessing in many ways. Marcia, welcome and say hello and tell us a little bit about Walk Tall Girl Productions and yourself. And you can mention that you were on our board at one time if you want.
Well, you've already mentioned it, so I don't have to. Hi, everybody. I'm Marcia Pendelton, and I am founder and president of Walk Tall Girl Productions. We are a boutique marketing, audience development, and group sales agency for the performing arts with a special emphasis placed on the theater. And we are primarily concerned with providing access to the performing arts for audiences of color, with, again, with a special emphasis placed on audiences from the African diaspora. So that doesn't mean African Americans or Black Americans. It is people from the English speaking Caribbean, also Afro-Latinos. So wherever Black folks are, from the continent of Africa to Europe, those are the audiences that we try to reach out to who are here in the United States. I've been in business since 2000. So 2020 was my 20th anniversary. Didn't get a chance to celebrate it because we were all closed in. But at some point in time this year, I am definitely going to do some kind of party, a late celebration of the 20th anniversary or an early celebration of the 25th. Who knows? But it's definitely going to be a party. I sit on the board of directors of the Black Theater Network. Our 36th annual conference will be in Detroit. That has been put off for 2 years, but we've done some things like many other organizations in the digital space. But we will be having our in-person conference in Detroit, Michigan. We are returning to Detroit. The last time we were there was in 1993, and our keynote speaker was August Wilson. So I'm also on the board of directors of the Black Public Relations Society. That's a new assignment that I'm about to dive into. In addition to the work that I do through my company, I am also a producer and host of a show on WBAI. It's a weekly arts and culture show. It's called Backstage Stories. That started in December of 2020. So I've been on the air for over a year now and have become one of the top shows on WBAI. And I am happy to say that I've had all kinds of folk on the show, but especially my theater family, including Tanya Pinkins. I've also had John Leguizamo on the show, LaShawns, so many, Lilius White, many Tony Award winners, as well as Drama Desk winners, any kind of acknowledgement that you can receive in the theater, those folks have been on my show. So I am looking forward to that. My show next week will be in solidarity with the AAPI community. There have been a lot of shows this, the second half of the season from the AAPI community, but they've been off Broadway, not on Broadway.
I wanted to mention that because you did actually mention that there are more plays by Asian Americans recently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was focusing on Broadway, and I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to, but I think Broadway has a story of its own.
Yeah, so that's a whole other thing. Before we had the 7 playwrights and a return of an eighth to the Broadway space. There were a lot of things happening off Broadway before there was this availability of Black narratives on Broadway this season. I will admit that I think some of them under pre-pandemic would not have made it to Broadway. And that's just the truth of it. That's really just the truth of it.
Well, I see this
and others definitely would have, but would have had a much more difficult time. But I don't see anything happening in terms of what's in the pipeline for Broadway coming up for 2022, 23, some big stuff like the piano lesson and the death of a salesman. But beyond
The one
that, I
is
don't
that
see a lot.
is that the one that originated in London?
In London, yeah, with
Yeah,
Wendell Pierce and Sharon D. Clark.
right. The Lohman family is a black family in this
In
version
this
of it.
in this version of it, yeah. So beyond that, I don't see a whole lot
Well,
in the pipeline.
I want to sort of frame this as a good news, bad news conversation.
Mhm.
Let's start with the good news, though. The good news is that there has been a greater opportunity in this current season for diverse voices to be heard. I thank you for the context that you gave to that. I agree that I'm not sure that as much would have happened.
Right.
You see, it's twofold. It's not just the pandemic. It's not just shutdown. It's George Floyd, and it's an aggressive statement by the BIPOC community. It's white. What is it? White America, we see you. What was that?
White American theater, right in White American theater, we see you.
Yeah.
Because we could not go anywhere, because we could not go about our lives, we were all forced to see the murder of George Floyd. And that sparked lots of conversation through social media. People began to share, as particularly in the Black theater community, about the blatant racism that they had experienced, as well as the microaggressions. But it began conversations, organizations to deal with it sprung up. I said that I am a member of the Black Theater Network. We have been advocating for Black theater since the late 80s. So it's been over, this is our 36th year, our 36th conference. And that grew out of the Black Theater Association, which was a part of the Association for Theater in Higher Education. So because we could not go about our lives, we were forced to see what communities of color have been talking about for years and years and years. We could not deny it. And so that sparked a conversation, and people willing, institutions willing to make some changes
So
in what was happening on their stages and within the institutions.
so we're talking about across the board. We're talking about regional theater. We're talking about it reached Broadway. I don't think anybody would have necessarily predicted that it was going to reach Broadway, but it did, and off Broadway, and we've had an increase or an awareness an awareness of the need for other voices at the table, and I think that there's been a movement in regional theater to have more people of color sitting on boards and even being artistic directors or having an artistic voice. So there's progress, and as a result of that, Broadway followed suit. And you said 7. Is it only 7 plus for Color Girls?
It was 7 plays, and then it was the return of slave play. So it was 8 plays. We did not talk about Lynn Nottage writing the book for MJ, and we cannot count Carolina Change, even though the heart of the show was the maid. It was not written by a Black person, so it was seen through another lens. So we would not count that. Coming into the spring, we have the return of the revival of For Color Girls with Intisaki Shange's seminal work. And unfortunately, that's going to be closing May 22nd. if something can't be done to save it. Maybe something will happen for the show with the Tony nominations coming up that will spark interest.
I want to echo what
So,
Ron Simons and Nell Nugent said in the paper, which is that if enough interest is spurred in the next 2 weeks, they will extend it.
absolutely.
And I want to say to the room, if you've never seen For Color Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, if you haven't seen it, you must see it. I understand that this is a very worthy version of it. I saw the original.
It is a glorious version. I had the privilege of knowing Intisaki Shange during the last decade of her life, particularly the last 5 years of her life. I knew when she updated the piece. Some of that was not apparent in this iteration of the show, but it is glorious. The choreography is absolutely wonderful. The performances are amazing. Kanita Miller, who is very pregnant, doing one of the most amazing, most difficult poems from the piece, A Night with Bo Willie Brown. It is, and it goes to another place when you see a woman who is with child doing that piece, but it is glorious, and I would encourage you all to go see it.
I also, to the room, I would just, anybody who could possibly see this and support this show, it is so painful to know that it hasn't. It's painful to watch all these worthy pieces open in commercial Broadway theater, and it's such a tough market, Marcia. Janelle says that she was proud to have brought investment funds to diversify the pool of investors for this timely revival. Well, thank you, Janelle. I'm going to at some point switch over to the marketing to the audience, but let's continue on this side of it, which is the effort that's the conscious effort that's being made to increase the visibility of people that haven't normally been part of the Broadway stage. And I keep it. Broadway is the toughest. I think regional theaters have probably been more successful at being more diverse. Would you agree with that, or do I not have it?
Not necessarily. I know that with the there was an effort back in the early 90s, and the buzzword was multiculturalism, and it was called the Lila Wallace Reader's Digest Fund at that point in time, and they invested millions of dollars into white theater companies to diversify what was on stage and behind the scenes. And then there was a cry from theaters of color that they weren't getting any attention, and they had been developing audiences for theater for many, many years. The Black Arts Movement in particular, Freedom Theater in Philadelphia, the National Black Theater and New Federal Theater here in New York, and Black Spectrum Theater here in New York. So those theaters received some funding to beef up their resources.
The reason why I had the impression that the regional theaters were actively doing it was because of. No, I just want to say that Teresa Eyring and Theater Communications Group have made it an initiative, a priority for like 5-10 years now.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily the case. Doing one show per year, which some of them have done, or a show every other year, and not necessarily doing anything in terms to diversify their boards or their staffs. There's a bit more of a push now from what I'm seeing, from what I know of different companies that I have dealt with across the country, but it's not this huge thing that's happening at this point, and we just need to be cognizant of that fact. Even with Broadway and the producing teams, and thank you so very much, Janelle, for being part of that, the effort to bring For Colored Girls, the revival of For Colored Girls back, the revival of For Colored Girls to Broadway. But still, the people who are around the table are not people that look like myself or look like Janelle. There is some movement, like through the Black Theater Coalition with their apprenticeships that's happening, and people making some institutions making a concerted effort to find people of color to fill positions. It's tough. It's going to take a long time. It is not something that is going to happen overnight, but you have to but there has to be an investment made. And it is up to the producing team or the institution of how much of an investment that you're going to make, including doing anti-bias, anti-racist training. People don't like to do that. People don't like to hear that. I have done that kind of training myself. They're like, why would you do that kind of training? Because I have bias as well. So even making that kind of commitment to take a look at what's going on internally with yourselves that we're not even aware of, that unconscious bias.
White privilege is a big one. White privilege is something that almost every one of us have to some degree, whether we acknowledge it or not. And I think it's so important to be aware of it, at least. I had some tough guests a while ago. I had Tara Moses, do you know Tara Moses? And Adam Heineman. And she called me out on white privilege, and she she was right. I mean, there are things that assumptions that we just have that are not as productive as we think they are, and are not really helping make the changes happen that should be happening. I mean, our culture is a very diverse culture, and our theater and our art should reflect that. And it's just crazy that it doesn't. And there are some people in our country right now who are never going to get over this hurdle. They don't want to. White privilege has now become a banner, a badge of honor for these people.
Yeah.
And what's the other? There's a new one. When people, they don't want to talk about things because it offends them to talk about.
It's critical race theory.
Well, critical race theory, but it's another term that we're using. I actually used it. I cited it in an essay that I wrote. But yeah, it's basically they already are embedded in white privilege. They are threatened by the idea that people want them to sort of loosen that up a little bit, and they take the other attitude of, I don't even want to talk about slavery because that makes me uncomfortable. You have no right to make me uncomfortable. Well, I think we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. We all have to be willing to be uncomfortable to face the realities of what we live through and what we've lived through and who we are. Indigenous culture has barely a foothold in our arts scene. The very, very specific pockets where Indigenous culture actually has a voice. Tara is Indigenous, the one that I told you called me out. She had a very strong position about the fact that when we talk about BIPOC, we don't remember that we're talking about Indigenous as well. and it's a problem. It's a very big issue. Um, we're all in this room, I think, at least, doing the best we can to confront these issues and to be part of the change, hopefully.
Mhm.
Um, but we got a whole country of crazy. I don't know what to do about it. What do we do about the crazies out there?
Well, it's not so much what we can do about the crazies, it's what we do about ourselves. You know, it starts, the work has to start internally first, um, and set that example, be the change that you want to see. Uh, it's not going to be easy. It's difficult. But there's a song that says, don't be discouraged, joy comes in the morning. So you have to get through the night. You have to get through the night in order to get to the next day. Um, so don't be discouraged. A friend of mine used to say to me, you've got to be better than best, do better than best. You know, so if you think you're doing your best, do better.
Marcia, I remember the phrase. It's white fragility. They call it white
Hmm.
fragility,
Yeah. Hmm.
and and they think that it's okay. White fragility. It makes me furious. Um,
Hmm.
so here we are, hopefully at a point of change, and I say that understanding full well that for the past 20 years, and I'm an old guy, so I've seen a lot of this. We've always thought we were at a point of change, and we were at a point of outrage. And Rodney King was a point. There were so many points, and nothing changed. Nothing changed. I believe that the pandemic, as you so wisely said, put us in a situation where we had to look at what was going on. We were in isolation. There was no turning away. We saw what was happening, and I think there is a greater consciousness right now,
Hmm.
um, and I think that it is being reflected in our art. Um, and I understand when you say that you don't think that some of the plays that were given an opportunity this season might not have been given an opportunity pre-pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
and I do think that I think that's because of the consciousness. I think it's something positive there. I think there's something positive that we can glean from this. Um, we can get to the negative later, but I think that there is a greater awareness and there's greater action that's being taken now. Um, do you feel, and Janelle, you can always jump in and correct me if I'm saying anything that you feel isn't quite on point.
Oh,
So,
I agree with what you're saying. I think for me, I take it from the point of, as producers, we all know that the bottom line is the green, right? That's the one thing that's sort of in common. And so sort of my approach now since the pandemic is really starting to introduce diverse people about the asset class of investing in theater, because a lot of people of color don't even know that this is something that they could have in their asset class. They don't know. And because Broadway has been such this sort of like secret society that people don't even know, you know, I'm just really excited to sort of really diversify this pool of money. I think if we start there, I think things can sort of bubble out, because that's sort of the genesis of it. And this sort of thing about you have to be, there's this elitism about who can come to the table, right? But I know that that's based on money, but I also sort of want to see a paradigm shift about pooling money together so that you're not excluded from these conversations. I think that taking it from there will really start to change things. And I'm seeing little bubbles of that here and there. Marcia, what do you think about that?
I think that I have been able to, not I think, I know that I have met and have worked with people who are new to the producing game on Broadway, and they are tremendous people. I got to meet some of them for on Thoughts of a Colored Man. And also, I think one of them is a pro on for Colored Girls as well. But it's a very, very exciting time in terms of people coming into the producing game and being at the table and being heard. That's very, very important for different ideas. Some of the most exciting things that we have done from an audience development perspective, I've done with some of these new producers on Broadway. One of the most exciting people that I've seen, and she's back on Broadway, and it was an announcement, is Candy Burris from the Housewives of Atlanta, a Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter. And she brought her 8 million followers to the table, her Instagram followers. And she was the kind of producer that is a dream. Wherever she went, she spoke about Thoughts of a Colored Man. And she did IG Lives with the guys. It was really something to see, and she ushered in a whole new audience. I remember the first night of Thoughts of a Colored Man, there were people who were sitting behind me, a group of women who were sitting behind me, and Candy was sitting 2 rows in front of me, and they whispered in my ear, "Is that Candy Burris?" You know, and I said, "Yes, it is." And they were so excited to see her and so thrilled that she had extended this invitation to her audience from Real Housewives of Atlanta and her music career to come into the Broadway space, and they came, you know. So having people like that on board, as opposed to people just lending their name. We saw a little over a decade ago what Oprah Winfrey did for the first iteration of The Color Purple, when she put that 10-minute segment on her show and crashed and crashed the telecharge website, you know, and she, each and every time she ran it, it crashed the website, you know, and people came from all over the country because she said, "You better come, you better get your tickets now," that invitation. So that's very, very important. So new folks coming to the table, bringing new ways to communicate with different kinds of audiences. All of that is tremendously exciting. So.
I'm gonna move to the other side of this for a second. I want to talk about because you're a marketer. I mean, that's what you do. You're marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk for a moment about how marketing, if it does at all, is it different with these works, with trying to bring in a BIPOC community to support theater as an audience? Is it a different process than it would be if you were doing, I don't know, what?
Certainly, because different communities communicate in different ways.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Different communities communicate in different ways. Like, for example, the reason why I kind of tuned in late, because number one, I was traveling today. I came up from DC, and but before I got here, I had to drop off a payment for Dance Africa. BAM Dance Africa, which is a huge event, cultural event that's been going on for almost 40 years now. How many have heard about Dance Africa here in Brooklyn? Okay. And then there's also something called the International African Arts Festival. And then there is something in Philadelphia called Adunde. And then there is something in another piece in Brooklyn, and not in Brooklyn, but in Philadelphia, a 2-day festival that the Roots do, a 2-day music festival. Also, there is the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation annual legislative weekend. There are things, events that happen within communities that draw thousands of people where you definitely need a presence. Harlem Week, which is, it used to be a month, now it's 2 weeks, and it's virtual and in person. Thousands of people come out for that event, and having a presence there. If it's a booth, if it's a performance on stage. Also, there's the Essence Festival that attracts people from all over, Black women from all over the world. You need to be able to meet people where they are, you know, and some of these events that I just mentioned, establishing a presence at special events, going into churches. There is no such thing as a monolithic Black church. You know, each church is different, has its own personality, and how you get to the congregation, or even if they want you there or not. Those things. Also, what they call the Divine Nine, Black fraternities and sororities, the Black professional organizations that developed when we were excluded from other organizations like the American Medical Association and the National Medical Association. That was for Black doctors. So you have to have that knowledge of where people are and how they're living their lives and how they communicate with each other, and how important word of mouth is. It's still, yeah, social media is huge in the African-American community with influencers, but it's also important to be on the ground with people, and the trust. People trust me because I've been doing this for a long time. You
Well,
know.
let me ask you a question. The fact that we've had an increase of these works that have been produced in commercial Broadway theater, has it made a difference in terms of audience response? Have we gotten the audiences? Has the Black community come out and supported these works? I say Black community because the pieces for the most part have been Black. The African diaspora, as you mentioned earlier.
It depends on what the show. It depends on what the show was. You know.
What shows have been successful?
Ruben Santiago Hudson's Lackawanna Blues.
I heard that was terrific.
It was a terrific show, and we did some very, very different things. You know, Ruben challenged us. You know, let's just not do the same old, you know, like, and dealing with Nanny and the parties that Nanny used to give at her house. We came up with Ruben's Juke Joint, you know, and he had the blues band, and it created an opportunity for Ruben to play with the blues band, but also to promote the show, because blues music was a big part of that. Also, Thoughts of a Colored Man, they were 1 and 2 on the in terms of the number of African Americans or people from the African diaspora who came in to see that show. They were 1 and 2. On the weekends in particular, with Thoughts of a Colored Man, there were I would venture to say 85 to 90% of the audience was Black. And I saw that on a regular basis.
That's what was hoping you would say, because
Mhm.
I mean, I remember 10 years, whenever Caroline or Change, for instance, was playing, um, and also Stick Fly. I mean, at the place I would go to, where I would be in the audience, and I was expecting to see a higher percentage of black people in the audience, and it still was a hard sell. It was hard to get. It was hard to convince the Black community that Broadway was worth their $150, I guess.
It's not so much, I know that one night we did, one afternoon we did Brotherhood on Broadway. And after the show, there was a conversation between the playwright Keenan Scott II and Michael Eric Dyson, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. And everybody, I've never seen this before, just about everybody stayed for that post-show discussion and purchased tickets. You know, like we had a huge group that anchored the event. And then we also had the discounted tickets. People have learned to look for discounts as well. So the audience has become more sophisticated than it was when Stick Fly was happening. But
Stick Fly, I'll say producer is for Color Girls.
yeah,
Yeah,
but the other piece of it is you have to make an investment. You have to make an investment, and it's the runway time is longer in terms of reaching out to specific communities. The runway time is longer. And also coming out of the pandemic, you have you had a community that was hardest hit by COVID. And then it was also had issues with vaccinations, you know, being vaccinated, receiving misinformation about the vaccine. And then when it came time to come to Broadway, we had to jump through all kinds of hoops in order to see the shows that were meant for us to see, you know. So there, you have to take all of that into consideration. But the good news is that in spite of those things, some shows did really well up until the time that COVID decimated them. You know, when Omicron came along, Omicron decimated Thoughts of a Colored Man. I also thought that Clyde's was absolutely amazing. It was an amazing show, but it did not get the support that I thought that it deserved. And Lynn Nottage is just one of my favorite people, period. Period.
Well, the shows that are kicking it right now are the usuals. It's The Music Man, it's Aladdin, it's Lion King, which an argument can be made is, argument been made that Lion King is diverse, but those are the ones that are all sucking the audiences in, and we have to acknowledge that, given the fact that we're in a post pandemic culture right now, there has to be some shrinkage of the audience. The audience has to be. There are fewer potential theater goers than there were. Also, the tourist industry, it's actually picking up now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, there was no tourist industry, so a lot of shows that were opening had very little. They were competing with other shows for such a limited number of audience members.
Sure.
So the timing, that's why I keep saying it's good news, bad news. Do you think that any of the plays that, like, let's say Passover, seems to be, there seems to be some talk that Passover is probably going to get a Tony nod. Um, Lackawanna Blues. I don't remember seeing what the Lackawanna Blues is. I didn't. I've been reading the gossip. It seems like Lackawanna Blues should be worthy of consideration as well. It's going to be curious. It's very going to be very interesting to see whether the increase in diversity is reflected in the Tony nominations.
We'll see. I hope so. One of this is full disclosure. MTC is one of my clients, and I've been with them all year long, and not just working on the Black plays, but working on every play with other consultants to diversify the audiences. And one of some of the most fun that I had this year was working with Skeleton Crew. And even though it was closed down twice due to COVID, and some of the things that we wanted to do at the beginning of the preview period, we had to kind of just, we didn't have a whole bunch of time. So it became Detroit Week as opposed to Detroit Month, like bringing in, the mayor of Detroit came in, we did Detroit Night. People flew in from Detroit to support Dominique and her husband who are from Detroit. It was crazy. It was crazy. It was such a joyous celebration of Detroit and Detroit artists who are all over Broadway, including Michael R. Jackson with the amazing piece,
A Strange Loop.
A Strange Loop. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. He's from Detroit. So celebrating that, bringing attention to that was extra. It was an extraordinary experience and very, very important. So, but MTC, I know for a fact, has made the effort both on stage and behind the scenes to really change their culture. And I've seen it change with my own eyes, and I could see more of that with institutions and even with commercial producers. I'd be very happy.
Well, let's hope. The thing that I'm concerned about is because we had this surge of voices coming into the theater during a very difficult period. I'm just concerned that it's going to discourage the future voices or discourage people from bringing in I mean, there's so many reasons why things didn't financially succeed. And I mean, you could say that, well, you have to say that there were a lot of shows competing for similar audiences.
Oh, absolutely.
So what do you do? I'm just hoping that the Jello sticks to the wall finally. I mean, we've had something that feels somewhat triumphant to a degree, and I hope that it carries over into the future. What do you think? Do you have any ideas, any guesses about the future, any predictions? Do you think that we've made a change?
Some people have, and we will see that. We will definitely see that. And those who haven't, we will definitely see that. And people are no longer afraid to speak up and speak out about what is happening or what is not happening. I think that is important. So we have to wait and see. It didn't get like this overnight, and it's not going to change overnight. Sometimes it's baby steps, and sometimes it's giant leaps, and sometimes it's those things in between. And somebody said, put it in small theaters. That's true. Broadway, not everything is supposed to be on Broadway,
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that is a whole other conversation. And also, things need time to develop. I went to see something last night in DC, and someone said, "Is it ready for?" A Broadway producer asked me and said, "Is it ready for Broadway yet?" And I'm like, "Not quite. It still needs work." The music was amazing. The singing was amazing. There were still some holes in the story that needed to be dealt with, and they will be dealt with. But it would be a disservice to bring that particular musical to Broadway right now, because it needs more time to marinate, you know?
And a good producer should be willing to take it on
should
and
be
allow.
willing to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, really. Do you want to say what the show is, just so it's on our radar, so that we can look for it?
Grace. It's called Grace.
Okay, so it's good to know. Janelle, do you have any thoughts that you want to add to our conversation?
Yeah, I would say that I was very inspired by the creative marketing efforts that I saw this year. And specifically when we were talking about thoughts, I had also invested in that. And I thought it was really interesting how they incorporated the barbershop motif and took it into the communities to engage with the communities. I think that our communities are getting much savvier, that we have to be on the other end creative about how we approach them. We're not cookie cutters. So it's going to force the marketers to approach the audience in creative ways. But I think if we can do that, they will come. But I feel like we are in this weird position where we almost have too much product, which is not really a thing, because to me, there can never be too much theater. But the balance of I can even speak for myself. There's so much that I want to see that I'm like, oh, when am I going to make this? Or when am I going to make that? And in my head, Marcia is sort of like my smart friend that does all my homework for me, so that with her newsletters, I always feel like I'm in the know, that I didn't miss anything, even though I might have been busy doing something else. So Marcia, thank you so much for all that you do, and just, correlating all of that information so that we feel like we're abreast of what's happening in our community.
Yeah, it's really and truly important, and that's taken a number of years. And the newsletter came about because I noticed that I was sending out a lot of information to people, and the open rate for the dedicated e-blast was going down, and someone suggested to me, well, why don't you do a newsletter? And I'm like, okay, so
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's something that I enjoy, and it's something that people look to.
Can you give people put something in the chat so they know how to sign up for your newsletter?
Sure, absolutely. I will do that. My website is under construction, but you can still. I'm about to do a revamp, but you can still sign up for the newsletter. Another thing that I'm about to do, hold on one second. I cannot walk and chew gum at the same time, or type and chew gum at the same time. One of the things that I want to do is, I have Black Theater Online, but I'm also creating something called In Common, which is IN, and then it's COMMON, all one word, capital I, capital C. And I really and truly feel that the arts will give us the opportunity to connect in a way that nothing else does. I'm a big fan of New Federal Theater. And when they did a piece called Gunlum's Legacy, we did a solidarity night in solidarity. It was Asian and Black theater night. It was an extraordinary event. And at intermission, even though we had come in with our own specific tribes, at intermission, people were speaking were talking to each other about what they had been experiencing during the first act. So that's one of the things that I will be doing, creating multicultural, multi-ethnic experiences through theater. So people will go to the theater, but also be able to connect afterwards. And sometimes that connection is a reception where you can talk to each other, but mostly it's with food, and we can sit and we can talk and we can break bread. It's hard to have ill feelings about someone when you're sitting at the same table eating with them, you know. So
You have a nicer family
look
than
for
other
that.
people do.
So look for that. Look
Yeah.
for that as well.
I'm going to ask you this. You don't have to go into too much detail, but if people in the room um, want to reach out and and have more diverse audiences come and support the work, and even this is something I need to know as well. Are there a couple of pieces of advice you can give people in terms of how you can effectively reach out to other communities and bring other people in?
I think it all starts on the page. Okay, if you understand that, it all starts on the page.
So it's the product.
It's the product. It's where I begin, and I look for ways, people, places, things that are thematically tied to the work. So if there is, Grace is about African American culinary traditions. And so one of the smart things that they did was to connect with a Black Restaurant Association in Washington, D.C. If it is set in Philadelphia, and there's some more things, so some more references to Philadelphia that they need to make. I'm from Philadelphia, so I was able to recognize some things like the Vogel family that does the Philadelphia Tribune, the oldest Black newspaper in the country. But they started a catering business back in the 18th century. So being aware of that, looking for those kinds of connections. The other piece of it is, if you are going to hire an expert, I guess, make sure that they are experts. I think one of the things that I'm a theater person, okay? I'm a theater person, and I have a tendency to think that way when I look at the work. So I'm not saying that people who don't come from a theater background can't get the job done, but I'm saying that if you are working with people who do have that theater background, who could make those connections that someone who is coming from some other kind of marketing experience would not be able to make, because they don't have that kind of information. I think that that's important to take a look at as well. And also speak with the artist. Theater is, the arts are not created in a vacuum. So speak to the artists. The artists always know who they're writing for. Who they're writing for. It's not, and I have very few of them who say, well, I've written this for everybody. No, they're very specific.
I do hear that a lot, though, Marcia, I have to tell you.
Who they're writing for. No, this group of young artists that I know that are coming up. I love Dominique well, Dominique Morisseau
Morisseau.
is very clear. They are very clear about who they're speaking to. This is the audience that I want in here, and yes, I want everybody else to come, but I specifically want you to do that. You know, I specifically want you to create that experience for them. You know, so I think, and don't with Grace. It is set in Philadelphia, so I don't really think it has anything to do with the book in particular, but it is with African American traditions set in Philadelphia. So,
I think people are sending you private messages. I'm not seeing these.
yeah.
So I want to wind up a little bit. You've been profound.
Because I got to go to the theater tonight.
Okay,
After traveling all day, I got to go to the theater tonight. I'm going to see Wedding Band by Alice Childress.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Away Tempo has directed it. I'm really looking forward to going to see it. And I really don't want to go out in this rain, but I will.
I hear it's fabulous, though. I hear it's
Yeah.
absolutely fabulous. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, if you're looking for a major directing talent, Away Tempo is all of that and more.
Well, well, let's sort of wind this up a little bit. I do want to say to the room that if you have any questions, now's the time to ask them, because we're gonna be ending in a moment, so that Marcia can go off and get ready for her evening. Normally we get quite Q&A at the end. I think that you've been incredibly eloquent, Marcia. I'm very moved by your whole presence. I think that you have a eloquence and an elegance about you that I respect and admire very much.
Thank you.
Can you type the name of the director into the
Sure.
so people will be able to find?
Away Tempo.
It's not coming into me, so you didn't do it to everyone.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, oops. Sorry. Everyone.
There it is. Oh, Jane Dubin provided.
Okay, she did it.
Thank you, Jane.
Jane is on it.
Yeah. Janelle, I also thank you for being part of the conversation. I would have welcomed you to jump in as much as you wanted to.
My pleasure. Marcia, I hope we can continue this conversation sometime soon.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad that you're making this amazing effort to change hearts and minds and bringing people into opportunities that they don't know about.
Exactly.
Right. They don't know about it. But if you tell them, if you invite them to the party, taking the title from Donna Walker Kuhn's book, Invitation to the Party, then people will come.
I'm a theater evangelist.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Okay. So thank you again for being with us today and for sharing so much of your knowledge. You are a wealth of information.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's my honor and my privilege to have you and to share you with this group. I'm going to say a few words of farewell to the YouTube viewers and to everybody else. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope that you've listened carefully to a lot of what Marcia had to say today, because it's a lot of important stuff, and it's a lot of change that needs to happen, and nobody thinks it's easy, but it has to be done, and it starts, as she said, with ourselves. So YouTube viewers, thank you for being with us. Know, everybody, that we do this as a community service, which means that you don't have to pay, but we don't mind if you do. So if you want to support us and you want to keep true, strong, and healthy going forward, and we do plan on continuing these virtual community gatherings well into the future. Uh, when when everything is all clear and there's no more COVID, I think I still want to keep doing these on Fridays at 5 o'clock virtually, so that I can get so many people from so many different places in the country and in the world in the room with us, so that we can have these conversations. So if you want to support us, go to trudonate.com, trudonate.com. And you YouTube viewer, if you decide you want to become part of the weekly gathering and be here with us when we're doing this in person, live on virtual, then email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com, and put Zoom in the headline in a way that will make me laugh. Okay, so thanks everyone.